Hello guys, and welcome to what is a brand new series for this channel. It's just going to be, well, not a short one, but it's just going to be a set limit one. It's going to be a 13-parter, and as you've probably guessed from the title already, and the fact that it's going to be a 13-parter, it is based on Doctor Who. And more specifically, all the individual actors that have played Doctor Who through the years, starting off with, of course, William Hartnell, which we're going to be talking about today. And it's basically going to be involving me reading from this book, The Doctor's Who's Who, which you can see there, written by Craig Cabell, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Craig, and published by John Blake, John Blake's Publishing. I'll get onto that in a second. But yeah, the idea came to me a couple of weeks ago when I was reading through it, and I just thought, there's probably a lot of Doctor Who fans out there that probably don't know much about the actors that have all played the Doctor, and I thought it'd just be interesting to sort of share that with other fans, because I've really enjoyed reading the book. It really is a great insight to all of them. You know, the career before the Doctor, you know, what sort of characteristics they brought to the show, and of course, you know, how it affected them after leaving the show, and for those that are still involved in it, and you know, the three that obviously are not with us anymore, how it affected their lives. So I just thought it would be an interesting one to share with you all, and I hope it's a successful series. So I got in touch with the very nice people at John Blake's Publishing, asking for the permission to do it. Obviously, taking extracts from the book, and they very kindly said yes, and have allowed me permission. So you know, a big thank you to them. And I'll put all the information in the description below of sort of to their website and to other books that they've published and everything. And also, depending on how the views go on this, there may be some competitions, maybe, sort of towards the end of the series. I'm going to see how it goes. But again, they have very kindly offered to send me some copies of this book. So like I say, depending on how the views go and how successful it is, and if people like it, then I might run a few competitions where you could win your own copy of this book. And it really is worth the read. It is a fantastic book, as you'll see shortly from the extracts that I read from it. So that's sort of the introduction done and out of the way. So we're going to start off, like I say, with the very first Doctor, William Hartnell. And as well as sort of reading that book, I'm going to give my own sort of personal opinion. You know, I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. I grew up, or when I was growing up, my older brother, in the 90s, he was already a big Doctor Who fan. His favourite being Tom Baker. So I kind of grew up on a lot of the earlier stuff. More Tom Baker than others, but I have watched, you know, at least one episode of all the incarnations of the Doctor. So I was already a massive fan before it came back in 2005. But if, you know, the brand new series is still, you know, amazing, and just good that such an iconic TV show has made a comeback, and such a successful one at that. Obviously celebrating its 50th anniversary last year, and yeah, that was fantastic in itself. So like I say, I'll be reading from the book, which is obviously facts and details about the actors, but does have the author's own opinions, himself being a Doctor Who fan. So the things that I read from the book will be his opinions, and then I'm going to give my own opinion sort of afterwards. So yeah, let's get started with who was William Hartnell. William Henry Hartnell was born on 8th of January 1908 at 24 Regent Square, South Pancras, London. His mother, Lucy Hartnell, was a commercial clerk. To his dying day, William Hartnell never knew who his father was, or where he had originated from. His mother had come from Taunton, and Hartnell maintained a love of the West Country throughout his life. This may explain why he lied about his birthplace on Desert Island Disc in 1965, claiming that he had come from Seaton in Devon, which of course he hadn't. Hartnell's formative years were in a tough working-class environment. His illegitimacy would have caused him some embarrassment, and he would get into scraps as a young working-class boy. If we had to believe a journal he left behind after his death, written in the early 1920s and mentioned in his own granddaughter's biography of him, he was fostered by a family called Harris while his mother took employment as a nanny in Belgium. In Hartnell's biography, Who's There, written by his granddaughter Jessica Carney, It relates that he would again live with his mother in Holborn some time after that, but he continued to be a wild card into his teens when he had to choose a profession. At the age of 16, in 1925, Hartnell took to the boards, but not as an actor. He joined Sir Frank Benson's Shakespearean Company as an assistant stage manager, property manager, assistant lighting director and a general dog's body. It was a 2-year apprenticeship in theatre and classical acting skills, with the occasional opportunity of taking a walk-on part. It was all tough work at the end of the day, as Hartnell explained. It was good training, not only in Shakespeare but in keeping fit. Sir Frank Benson believed in keeping actors in good health, and we were organised into hockey teams and cricket sides. Benson was in his late 60s by then, so little chance for him exerting himself too much. By the age of 18, Hartnell was touring the country as an actor, the bug to perform finally taking him over. He no longer wanted to hide backstage, but wanted to progress his love of comedy. For 6 years he was touring comedy, song and dance shows, understudying such respected actors as Bud Flanagan from the infamous Crazy Gang. From this he progressed to understudying in London's West End, but would take the main role when the play left London and toured the provincial cities. So Hartnell built his skills slowly and became quite well known in the acting world as a player of farce. This progressed to short comedy films in the 1930s, such as one of Hartnell's favourite roles, albeit only a 50-minute feature, as a man, Edward Wimperly, who eats an explosive in I'm an Explosive in 1933. Sounds an interesting concept. Comedy was a love of Hartnell's, as he confessed. My guiding light was Charlie Chaplin. He influenced me more than any other factor in taking up acting as a career. A lot of actors adopt an initial love of comedy before settling down to another genre. For example, horror icon and one-time Doctor Who Peter Cushing had an early role opposite Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in their movie A Chump at Oxford in 1940. Hartnell played in over 20 films before the outbreak of the Second World War. Not all of them comedy, but many quite short character roles, with his parts quite minor. Hartnell's career was stopped by the war. He was drafted into the Tank Corps, but very quickly had a nervous breakdown and was invalided out after 15 months. The strain was too much, he said. I spent 12 weeks in an army hospital and came out with a terrible stutter. The colonel said, "Better get back to the theatre, you're no bloody good here." That's very straight and to the point there. I had to start all over again. I was still only a spit and cough in the profession, and now I had a stutter which scared the life out of me. Hartnell worked hard to overcome his illness, which he did with gusto. In 1942 he had an uncredited role as a German soldier in the Will Hay classic The Goose Steps Out. Although his part in the film was very minor, Hartnell was working with a major comedy star of his day, which gave him much exposure. In fact, Hartnell's cold image in the film, set against Hay's chaos, is noteworthy and was a taste of what was to come. As Hartnell's roles got larger, they also grew colder. His first real praiseworthy appearance was in a movie called Sabotage at Sea in 1942, where he played a villain under heavy makeup and a moustache. Through this role, Hartnell learned that you didn't need much makeup to be a sinister character. A normal-looking man with much facial expression could be just as cruel. So Hartnell developed and grew with each significant role that he played. In 1943, Hartnell was approached by film producer Sir Carol Reed to play an army sergeant, Ned Fletcher, in the film The Way Ahead, alongside David Niven and a young John Laurie, later Fraser in Dad's Army. Hartnell really made an impression in the film, with his hard-piercing stare and cast-iron personality. His first scene is in itself a show of strength. Heckled by a man at a railway station, he holds back, but looks dangerous. Unfortunately for the man, he becomes one of the sergeant's conscripts, but Hartnell's character never mentions it or shows any extra animosity towards him, which shows an impressive depth of character. The film is very true to life in its interpretation of how the different walks of life came together in the barrack room, and how they were brought together as a credible unit by their screaming sergeant, something Hartnell does an awful lot of. The Way Ahead showcases Hartnell in his prime, a robust young actor with a resonant voice and much stage presence. He works perfectly alongside David Niven, especially when Niven questions his discipline with the men, but perhaps that discipline is as feisty as that bestowed upon him no more than 18 months previously in his own war. This strongly suggests that Hartnell was a better actor than a soldier. The Way Ahead was a big success, and Hartnell became a popular actor, albeit now typecast. But perhaps he can blame himself for that. With regard to The Way Ahead, he visited a real-life army sergeant, thus overcoming his wartime angst, and showcasing his desire to always research his roles thoroughly. Hartnell's typecasting became more prominent in the theatre with Seagulls over Sorrento in 1950, which starred John Gregson, Nigel Stock, Bernard Lee and Ronald Shiner. Hartnell was Petty Officer Herbert in this nautical farce. The play tells the story of a group of volunteers in a disused wartime naval fortress where secret peacetime radar experiments are going on. Although a comedy, Hartnell was a straight man, the no-nonsense military officer, and people began to know what to expect from him when he came on stage or screen. Hartnell longed to do more comedy roles, but the typecasting had taken over completely. In 1951 he took a role as a recruitment sergeant in The Magic Box, a movie made to celebrate the Festival of Britain and showcased many great British character actors. The film was a biopic of the life of dreamer and pioneering inventor William Freese-Green, including talent such as Joyce Grenfell, Margaret Rutherford, Joan Hickson, Thora Hird, Sid James, Richard Attenborough and even Laurence Olivier in a cameo role as a policeman. Hartnell did return to comedy, albeit as an army sergeant, again in the TV comedy series The Army Game, and the first Carry-On film, Carry-On Sergeant in 1958, in itself a pastiche of The Army Game, and with the parallels of The Way Ahead. Hartnell was really giving himself the niche roles of over-serious officer that had a bunch of dead-enders to sort out, and the laughs would be generated by the dead-enders, not him. In fairness, perhaps it was his unforgettable role as super cool gangster Dallo against Richard Attenborough's Pinky in Brighton Rock in 1947 that really typecast him. One does get the impression that Hartnell's character is the boss in Brighton Rock. His sharp suits and cool exterior set against the cavalier antics of Pinky certainly suggests a role of authority made complete by Hartnell's acting skills. The tough roles continued. In 1957 Hartnell appeared as Cartley, the bespectacled, hard-nosed manager of Hawlett Trucking in Hell Drivers, another great British movie and one that highlighted excellent young talent such as future James Bond, Sean Connery, Stanley Baker, Gordon Jackson, David McCallum, Herbert Lom, Sid James and Patrick McGowan in one of his finest roles. Although Hartnell only appears at the beginning and the end of the movie, his hard man presence as the company boss is felt throughout the film, making Hell Drivers a milestone in his career, as well as a classic, gritty and tough British movie. Hartnell did have a couple of comedy roles amidst the hard stuff. In 1959 he played alongside Peter Sellers in The Mouse That Roared, and he worked with Sellers again in the Bolton Brothers comedy Heavens Above, albeit as Major Fowler. In 1963 Hartnell broke the mould and gave one of his very best performances, playing talent scout Dad Johnson in This Sporting Life. The movie starred Richard Harris and Rachel Roberts, both of whom were nominated for Oscars, with Roberts eventually picking up a BAFTA. The screenplay was written by David Storey, based on his own novel, and from the moment the eerie Jerry Goldsmith type opening music starts, it is clear that the film is very different. Roberts' character is a bitter woman who is indifferent to miner Frank Matchin and his hard ways. Matchin is a talented rugby player who the kind, gentle and modest dad takes under his wing to get into big time rugby. He succeeds, and once he accomplishes this, he quietly moves on. This Sporting Life had some great cameo roles in it, such as Arthur Lowe and Leonard Rossiter, which enhances the enjoyment by lightening the storyline somewhat. It was This Sporting Life that brought the possibility of Hartnell becoming Doctor Who to the show's producer. Verity Lambert went to see the movie, which was released in January 1963, and was struck by Hartnell's depth of acting ability. Hartnell's gentleness and life experience is a perfect counterbalance against Richard Harris's unthinking bullishness, and one that impressed Lambert very much. Lambert approached Hartnell's agent to see if he would be interested in taking on the role of Doctor Who. She must have had some charm in order to persuade the agent into asking Hartnell. It wasn't his type of work at all. He had started out doing Shakespeare and adult comedy, then became the tough guy actor. But perhaps this was Lambert's carrot on the stick, to offer something completely different to the actor, something as wonderful as the role of Dad Johnson. The agent made the call and said, "I wouldn't normally have suggested it to you, Bill, to work in a children's television, but it sounds the sort of character part that you've been longing to play." The agent went on to explain that the part was of an eccentric old grandfather-cum-professor type who travels in space and time. Hartnell wasn't too sure about the part, but did agree to meet Verity Lambert and find out more. He said of the meeting, "The moment this brilliant young producer, Miss Verity Lambert, started telling me about Doctor Who, I was hooked." Perhaps it wasn't as clear-cut as that. Hartnell did go away and consider the offer, and perhaps it was the diversity, the break from typecasting, that persuaded him to take it on. As Lambert recalled, he was interested but wary when first offered the role. However, he soon made a decision and called her to accept the part. Hartnell would find the work gruelling. He was in his mid-50s and working 48 weeks a year, learning a variety of scripts and performing an action role, which was very hard work, as he admitted. Despite this, he loved every minute of it. The show became a smash hit, and Hartnell loved the idea of working for a young audience, as he said. "To me, kids are the greatest audience, and the greatest critics in the world. You know, I couldn't go out into the high streets without a bunch of kids following me. I felt like the Pied Piper." This was a fact echoed by his wife Heather, who used to pick him up from the railway station after a day's filming. She would say that he would get off the train and walk down the road with a stream of children behind him, not unlike the Pied Piper. Hartnell played Doctor Who for 3 years, and became quite wealthy because of it, earning the equivalent of about £4,000 per episode in present-day money, which was a good regular salary at the time. Hartnell said he quit Doctor Who because he didn't see eye to eye with the BBC over the use of evil in the show. He wrote in a letter to a fan, Ian McLachlan, in 1968 that it was noted and spelled out to me as a children's programme, and I wanted it to stay as such, but I'm afraid the BBC had other ideas. So did I, so I left. In her preface to Jessica Carney's biography of William Hartnell, Verity Lambert said that Doctor Who emanated from the drama department and not, as was the norm, the children's department. This may be the reason why the show started to develop more adult themes and ideas. As the old production staff moved on, including Lambert, more drama-based staff would take over in order to beef up the darker side of the show. This became more prevalent during Patrick Troughton's time as Doctor, so clearly the show was naturally progressing through the department it had originally come from, drama, not the children's department. This genesis could explain why the show attracts a broad fan base from people of all ages, not just children nowadays. Many critics think that Hartnell left for other reasons, i.e. he was pushed out because he cost too much money. Other regular actors were getting a quarter of what he was earning per episode. But the original 6-page treatment of the show clearly stated as a first paragraph that Doctor Who was an exciting adventure, science fiction drama serial for children's Saturday viewing. This vindicated Hartnell's reasons for leaving. Hartnell loved the adoration of young fans, but when the show started to get more sophisticated, more grown up and darker, his love and attachment towards the show started to diminish. This is reinforced by the fact that in 1964 he came up with an idea of a series called The Son of Doctor Who, in which a wicked son would wreak havoc across the universe and the Doctor would have to step in to sort things out. The BBC was not keen on the idea, but sometime afterwards Hartnell said, "I still think it would have worked and been exciting for children." One could argue that Hartnell's The Son of Doctor Who idea anticipated the new series story, The Doctor's Daughter, in which the audience is given the distinct idea that a spin-off series is highly likely, and, above all, has the potential to be successful. In The Doctor's Daughter, it was the real-life daughter of Doctor Who, Peter Davison, Georgia Moffat, who would take on the part. Hartnell preserved the dignity of his grandfather character during his reign as Doctor Who. In truth, his ailing health dictated that he couldn't have stayed on much longer in the role, even if he wanted to. A shame really, as 4 years later the show would be shown in colour. However, a story like Spearhead from Space, the first Jon Pertwee colour story, in which walking shop window dummies killed innocent civilians and consequently attracted the wrath of real-life parents, would have been the final heartbreak for Hartnell. When one appreciates how poor and unhappy Hartnell's formative years were, one can understand why he was a little over-sentimental towards children as the Doctor, not unlike the sensitivities Charles Dickens would show his young characters in his novels. He had a bad time himself as a child while working in a blacking factory, and his heart and soul was always with the younger generation. William Hartnell left Doctor Who at exactly the right time, unaware of the legacy he would create by doing so. The show was still popular, for he had quit while he was ahead. The BBC wanted it to continue, so another actor had to take over. The idea of regeneration took shape and gave the show its own excuse for reinvention. It is widely accepted that Kit Pedler and Jerry Davies came up with the idea of regeneration. Indeed, they were writers of the very last William Hartnell Doctor Who story, The 10th Planet, the first story ever to star the Cybermen. Heather Hartnell said that her husband was happy that Patrick Troughton took over the role. Hartnell was familiar with Pat's work, having worked on a film with him before the Doctor Who, Escape, starring Rex Harrison in 1947, so he believed the future of the show was in good hands. Hartnell would make one further appearance as the Doctor in the show for the 10th anniversary story The Three Doctors, playing alongside his successors Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee. He was a very unwell man at that time and had to read his short cameo roles from dummy boards. But he did it and enjoyed the experience too, spending some time with Troughton and Pertwee for publicity photographs. Within 2 years of the photo call, Hartnell would be dead from arteriosclerosis. He died on 23rd of April 1975, aged 67. Until her death in 1984, Heather Hartnell wrote to fans all over the world and attended several Doctor Who events. Such was the impact and legacy of the first ever Doctor Who. Today, William Hartnell's place in TV history is secured. He was the man who made Doctor Who popular, magical with children all over the world. Perhaps one of the best epitaphs Hartnell could have had, albeit inadvertently, was within a 2-page feature in the 1965 Doctor Who annual, entitled Who is Doctor Who? The article speaks fondly of Hartnell's time traveller. He is mostly very gentle and kind-hearted, and he has the utmost respect for life of any kind. And his heart is big enough to respect every one of the countless forms life has taken in all the ages and all the worlds. Hartnell believed wholeheartedly in Doctor Who, so much so in fact he lived the part more than any other he had played, as he told Jack Bell of the Daily Mirror on 23rd of April 1966. Doctor Who has given me a certain neurosis, and it is not easy for my wife to cope with. I get a little agitated, and it makes me a little irritable with people. In fact, Doctor Who seems to be taking over. Was this the reason why I left the show? The character taking him over? No, but the irritability was the first sign of his growing illness, arteriosclerosis, something not totally appreciated when he was in the role. He found it difficult to remember his lines. He lost his temper with cast members very quickly, especially with new ones. All the original cast and crew had left to pursue other projects, and, coupled with his failing health, he began to feel at odds with the show he so deeply loved. Why did he love it so much? Let us consider that in many of his post-war roles, he had played an army officer, and, what with such traumatic exit from the war himself, and his love being comedy, not tough guy roles, a general dissatisfaction is clearly evident regarding the course of his career. Another reason for his love of Doctor Who is encapsulated in a quote from the Doctor Who 10th Anniversary Radio Times special, where he recalls his lasting memory of the show. He had been asked to open a fete, so he dressed in his Doctor Who clothes and turned up in an old car owned by a friend. I'll never forget the moment we arrived. The children just converged on the car, cheering and shouting, their faces all lit up. I knew then just how much Doctor Who really meant to them. Further evidence of the reality of the show for children comes from Hartnell's last Doctor Who companion, Anneke Wells, who said, "My own children got wound up in it. One day while I was away rehearsing, they saw an episode in which I got carried off by monsters. They were very worried about whether I was going to come home that night. They didn't realise that the episode they had been watching had in fact been recorded the week before, and they half believed their poor mum had been gobbled up by the wicked monsters." So Hartnell had made a credible character and starred in a show that had a strong young audience. But what about afterwards? Was there a life after Doctor Who? If he was a TV icon, was Hartnell allowed to move on after the show? Also, if it was his most fulfilling role, was he happy to be a jobbing actor again? No, would be the general answer to all these questions. Hartnell was already booked to appear in pantomime that first Christmas after leaving the role. Handbills for Puss in Boots highlighted the fact that television's original Doctor Who would be a major star, when in actual fact he was a busking cobbler looking like Doctor Who. If that wasn't enough, other promotional lines for the pantomime read, "Meet the monsters from outer space," "Super Winner Dalek competition." Clearly Hartnell wouldn't be allowed to forget his greatest role very quickly. Although the pantomime played to large audiences, it had its fair share of criticism, which stemmed largely from technical problems. Acoustics were a nightmare, with the orchestra being too loud, and actors, including Hartnell, too quiet when reading their lines. Regardless, Hartnell continued to act, and in February 1967 he recorded an episode of No Hiding Place entitled The Game. Suddenly Hartnell was back in a military role, this time an ex-Indian army sergeant turned rent collector. Critics were harsh, and Hartnell wasn't truly allowed to move on. Actors who have played the Doctor ever since might possibly be wary of typecasting simply because of the way Hartnell was treated. But still Hartnell tried to carry on, taking on a guest spot in the popular Softly Softly in January 1968. It was here that he seemed to emerge from a low point. Due to the lack of work, harsh criticism and health problems, the main cause of his decline in acting abilities, he had been drinking an awful lot. But he suddenly perked up. On 25th of April 1968, Hartnell discussed doing a Robert Bork play at the Bristol Old Vic. It was called Brother and Sister and would co-star Sonia Dresdel, but it appeared that he had problems grasping the nuances of the part. The play ran for 4 weeks but didn't go on tour thereafter, the reason unclear. Just a couple more TV spots came his way after that, finishing with his return in colour in the anniversary Doctor Who story The Three Doctors. It seemed that Doctor Who overshadowed his career after he ceased to play the role, but it was Hartnell's escalating health problems that were the main cause of this, not a lack of acting skills. His consequent depressions led to more drinking bouts, and after brave efforts to restore his health and start acting seriously again, he fell short of expectation. Perhaps in hindsight he should have retired after Doctor Who, but he loved his work and didn't want to give in to illness, and aren't so many people like that. In retrospect, Hartnell had done enough to secure his memory in the hearts of the nation. He was Doctor Who, not the Doctor. When he played the part, nobody knew who the character was and where he came from. He was exciting and intriguing. Indeed, it has never been explained in the show if Susan Foreman was his granddaughter or not, as Carol Ann Ford explained. It was never really explained how she came to be with him, but it was sort of accepted that they had escaped together from another planet. Was she a fellow alien or an Earth child? Perhaps an orphan? Although Anthony Corburn's original script of an unearthly child has now been found, it takes nothing away from the intrigue that surrounded the show in its formative years. During the Hartnell years, there was a real air of wonder and eccentricity about the character and the show itself. Even the music was strange, and its eeriness coupled with the grainy black and white of the show helped achieve greater thrills for the expectant audience. One last thought, and perhaps final compliment to William Hartnell. When Richard Hurndall took on the role of the First Doctor in The Five Doctors to celebrate the show's 20th anniversary, his character was given much respect from his successors. It was even the Hartnell character who solved the cryptic question set by the great Rassilon himself at the end of the story, which earned nothing less than admiring shake of the head from the Third Doctor. He was the original, as Hurndall declared, and a great respect for the First Doctor Who has endured ever since. It is clear that William Hartnell left the programme with a heavy heart when he knew he couldn't cut the mustard of a gruelling production schedule anymore. He bowed out of show business slowly, painfully, over an approximate 3-year period after that, with his only memorable performance being his return to the show 7 years later for his very last TV acting appearance. He was the Doctor of Mystery, an eccentric old man, and the original interstellar Pied Piper, something his successor Patrick Troughton would build upon. So there we are, William Hartnell. A great insight to, what was a great actor and, by the sounds of it, a really great guy. And what a part to take on. It could quite so easily have gone wrong. A sci-fi programme around that time, mainly aimed at children, but also, gripping in adults as well. It needed the right actor, and the right cast and crew as well. But it needed that main actor to be spot on, and it could so easily have gone wrong and perhaps gone down the pan after one season and then never heard of again. But they got it just so spot on with Hartnell, especially to play that grandfather sort of professor type Doctor, and I believe that was the right sort of character to start Doctor Who off. There's been so many different portrayals of the Doctor with his different regenerations, but to start him off as that, very intriguing, mysterious man, but obviously a very clever man, and like I say, that sort of professor type, and Hartnell just took to that fantastically well. And it was showed really well in An Adventure in Space and Time, which was the drama created by Matt Gatiss, also a Doctor Who writer, around the 50th anniversary, and it was a fantastic drama. Really showed the creation of Doctor Who. It showed the struggle of Verity Lambert, being in a male-dominated sort of world, taking on something that not a lot of people sort of truly believed in, really. And expected it to fail. They didn't want monsters and sort of space aliens, stuff like that. But she stood up strong. She chose William Hartnell. She stood strong with that choice, and You know, David Bradley, who played William Hartnell, again a fantastic portrayal of him. You know, showed what it was like at home for him, what it was like away from the Doctor. Showed him struggling with the illness. You know, which obviously led to him, you know, often forgetting lines, which again, you know, in them days, you know, quite a lot of people talk about you know, the mistakes that were made, but you have to remember that the majority of the time they only had one take. You know, they were having to record those scenes live back in them days. You know, there wasn't the budget or the equipment and stuff to have take after take after take. And I mean, if you were to, you know, tell actors these days in TV shows, you know, you only have one take to get this right. I mean, you see all the outtakes that come up on TV and on the internet. You know, they struggle just as much. So, you know, it's very unfair to pinpoint Hartnell for some of the mistakes shown. But you know, it did really show his struggle getting through the show, but it did show how much he loved it, which again is, you know, pointed out in the very good piece there in the book, and how much that role meant to him, and sort of how disappointed he was with the way the show was going. But ultimately, I think it was the right time for him to go. You know, after that initial three-year period, and he was a great Doctor. He was a great first Doctor. I've seen quite a few of the episodes. I mean, unfortunately, the thing is with the early episodes of Doctor Who, so many of them are missing. You know, the Hartnell and Troughton years. There's so many missing episodes. I mean, I think it's about 90 different ones that are missing, which is crazy to think of. But luckily, quite a few of them seem to be getting found these days. So hopefully, it won't take too long to get them all back, and we can see them again. But you know, from what I have seen from Hartnell as the Doctor, he really was just a perfect first Doctor for me. Thought he played it really well. He had that sort of stern style to him, especially in the very start, sort of coming across maybe almost slightly cocky with the Earthlings, I suppose, with the humans, sort of, you know, them not being up to scratch, and him clearly being a lot cleverer than them. But you know, he had that slight sort of humour side to him. But ultimately, you know, he kind of grew and was a very kind, caring Doctor. And I mean, the most famous scene, which hopefully this should come up now, of him saying goodbye to his granddaughter Susan. One of the most famous scenes, really from early Doctor Who, and something that was sort of attributed to him ahead of the 25th anniversary of the Five Doctors. It started the show off with that in sort of tribute to Hartnell, and it's just a great piece of the show.
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
So, who was William Hartnell? That was William Hartnell. I hope people have really enjoyed that. I hope it's given them an insight into the very first Doctor, and the sort of guy that Hartnell was, and the other roles that he played during his career. And I hope it's something that you're going to enjoy, guys. Like I say, if this gets really good views, and I get good feedback and everything, then like I say, it's going to be continuing anyway. But let me know if you want me to do those competitions further on in the series, and I will get back in contact with John Blake Publishers, and hopefully get some books that I can send out to some lucky winners. So I will set some questions at some point. So yeah, give me your feedback, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Give me your thoughts on the first Doctor, William Hartnell. And yes, I will see you next week when it will be the turn of Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you very soon.